Hello and welcome to the podcast. A slightly slimmed down version this week to start with. Blackie's off on Christmas shopping duty, so we've had a few weeks off, and he might join us next week perhaps to fill in. Well, not really fill in, more completely replace and do a much better job. We've been joined by the original Violet Crumble supporter himself, Mr. Shuttlesworth. How you doing, Jesus?
Yeah, good. Thanks, mate. Good. Thanks for having me again, and thanks for confirming I'm slimmer than Blackie.
And a far better performer, I believe. But anyway, we'll see. We'll see how the podcast goes. And our veteran Fui will be joining us shortly. He's just attempting to drive his vehicle without committing incidents of road rage or having an interception the way that Aaron Rodgers has interceptions. So in the meantime, we're joined by Brash, who witnessed yet another excellent 49ers game this week. How you going, Brash?
Good, mate. How are you?
Yeah, season's greetings. Bit stale, I got to say, after 3 weeks off. But what a 3 weeks it's been. What an absolutely amazing 3 week gap. If you'd said when we were last recording that over the next 3 weeks, quarterbacks would turn in the suckiest quarterback performance in week 13 in history, followed by kickers turning in the suckiest week of kickers performance in history in week 14, people would have said you're nuts because, surely it couldn't get any worse, 2020. But then on top of that, not only do we have a festival of excellence between both quarterbacks and kickers trying to outperform each other for incredible crappiness, but in that 3 week period, the Steelers haven't won a game and the Jets have more wins than the Steelers. So maybe we should take 3 week breaks from recording more often and just see what sort of weird shit happens. Can you believe the Jets have more wins than the Steelers in that 3 week period?
Not entirely. I think in our last podcast, we questioned the pedigree of the quality of the Steelers record at the time.
Indeed.
They hadn't really beaten anybody, and I don't think we predicted that they would fall from grace the way they have over the last month, but I don't think it was a total surprise that they've stumbled. I think we sort of picked that a month ago.
I think I might have used the phrase specifically directed towards that Steelers fan, GG. I think I might have used the phrase fully fraudulent, and that was 3 weeks ago. And I'd say they're well past Blackie's somewhat fraudulent standard, and they're sliding down towards fully fraudulent at a rate of not. What do you think, Shuttlesworth? You surprised by the last 3 weeks, or is it just more of 2020 being 2020?
Probably a little bit surprised at how bad it looked, specifically this week as well. I don't know. I think it's easy to say, but it looks like a locker room that just did get ahead of itself, and now it doesn't have the right people in the room to pull it back together. It's sort of symptomatic of Steelers all along, isn't it? They've always seemed to have had these behavioural issues and stuff. It's an unhappy team on the sidelines, and I don't know whether Tomlin's too loose with it or what, but you look at them on the sidelines and no one looks like they have fun. No one really looks like, that's no worries, we're down now, we know what to do, a la, the Chiefs or someone like that, who you look at them on the sidelines and they know what they're doing, they're still confident. They look sort of despondent and, unsure of what to do.
Yeah, very, very strange, and I know it sounds odd, but you wonder just exactly how much of it is triggered by stupid shit like the TikTok routines of that wide receiver dancing on the opposition's logos, and how much of it is a deeper ingrained fundamental problem with Fat Ben. And I do think we talked about it in our previews of the season, that question mark over whether Ben could get through a whole year without being injured and perform at a high level. And the last 3 weeks especially, you got to wonder if he's durable enough to even finish the season, let alone make it into playoffs.
I think he might get through the season, but he is not capable of Big Ben performances anymore. His throwing motion looks completely off. He looks rigid, and his arm doesn't get full extension. He looks unwilling to throw it down the field, which has always been sort of one of those Big Ben trademarks. He's going to take shots down the field, but I think the first half he had 7 passing yards, I think it was, something ridiculous anyway. And
Oh, hang on. You're talking about Ben Roethlisberger, not Carson Wentz, right?
Yes.
Because he has almost become as bad as Carson.
But yeah, it was all, in the first half, it was all short stuff, screens, that kind of stuff, and even that wasn't working. So yeah, he may get through the season, he might be durable enough to survive the season, but what version of Ben, I think, might not be good enough anymore.
And who was the quarterback that they lost to? Following that Week 13 quarterback excellence festival, who would have dreamed that Ryan Finley would bounce back and beat Ben Roethlisberger and the Steelers juggernaut? But he did it with class and style. style, Brasher.
I tell you what really impressed me with the Bengals was how their offensive line stepped up. I don't know whether the Steelers were just going through the motions, given what they've got the Colts and Browns to finish the season, and probably thought that they were just going to walk through this one. I was really impressed with, given all the injuries and shuffling the Bengals' offensive line has gone through, how they stepped up and really almost manhandled the Steelers' defence, which is no joke. The defensive line, which is no joke normally. There was even there was one situation like where Watts, who's rightly gets all the plaudits this year for his stellar season. I think it was on the final drive when he had a chance to tackle Rocky Bernard behind the line of scrimmage on third down as they were trying to run out the clock, and he just looked disinterested. He sort of half-heartedly late went in to stop the play, and I just felt that the Steelers didn't come ready to play and got kicked in the teeth because they and they had a quarterback who played within his limitation.
Yeah, and it was almost like a 180-degree turnaround from the Week 13 performance where it was, gee, that quarterback backup really sucked. Hold my beer, I'm going to suck even more. It's like the message suddenly got through after that week of shithouse that if you're a backup quarterback, just play like a backup quarterback and don't turn the fucking football over, and you still have a chance, Because Finley was surprisingly composed, and they did a really good job. I mean, obviously Bernard as the running back had a really good performance. He's a bit of a veteran now, I guess. He played his role. T. Higgins continues to impress me. He's going to be a very good wide receiver. Didn't necessarily have huge numbers, but was very effective at drawing the coverage away from some of their other receivers. But the defense was the one that got him over the line there. And the Steelers look really super limited. No running game, and let's face it, they ain't going to get running at a Big Ben and his fat legs. And they just don't seem to be the same team of 3 weeks ago. Two other things out of that game. For me, I think unfortunately, I think the result, you're looking at that result, and if you're a Bengals fan, you're saying, oh, what a fabulous result. I actually think it's a really bad result for the Bengals in one sense, and that is it probably saves Zach Taylor's job. And I continue to believe that Zach Taylor is the worst coach in the NFL at the moment and has been for a year and a half. And I think the longer that they keep him around in Cincinnati, the less development you'll see out of Joe Burrows and some of the young ones like T. Higgins. So I think that's a real downside for the Bengals, is that it probably saved Zach Taylor's job. And then I think the other thing, which is pretty obvious in looking ahead for the rest of the season, what was becoming a bit of a series of really tea towel after tea towel weeks of games that didn't mean a lot. How fantastic is it to have a Week 17 matchup that is really going to bloody mean something between two old rival teams like the Browns and the Steelers? That was already an interesting game, but now it becomes something that's a potentially playoff position deciding, mouth-watering showdown with lots and lots of media hype. And it's been a long time since the Browns-Steelers games have really had that much significance towards the end of a year, apart from with the Browns actually win a game or not. To me, though, were the two other takeouts. Flipping around to the unexpected win for the week, we now have two teams with one win because the Jets managed to defeat the Rams. Brash, possibly to use a Blackie phrase, the most pointless win of the year. Cost them Trevor Lawrence. Yeah.
Not yet. I think if the Jags don't win again and the Jets don't win again, Jags I think just own strength of schedule right now to get the number one pick. But would you expect anything less from that franchise than doing away with the Lawrence thing? I tell you what it does do. We've talked on this show about whether the Jets even would be in for Lawrence. Yeah, because we don't. We're not even sure the coach is going to get punted yet, right? And there's been a conjecture around: do they stay with Donald? Do they go and draft Lawrence? Now they're in the pick 2. Are they now all in on Wilson or one of the other highly rated quarterbacks, or are they going to go with Donald again or trade down, and therefore trade down? So I think the draft got a lot more interesting out of it.
And I think potentially, if you're the fan of a certain team that wears purple and is from Minnesota, and you had the opportunity to trade up to get pick 2, and you gave the Jets a bundle of picks for that pick 2, that's potentially a really good outcome for the Jets, because God knows they've got an absolute bevy of holes they need to fill. So in one sense, sense. The more picks they have, the better. And then for the Vikings, that's actually a potential opportunity to get a Cousins replacement real cheap. Shuttlesworth, the sort of trade strategy you might be looking at if you guys continue to chart the course of excellence that you've had over the last few weeks.
Well, as much as you'd like to get away from the contract, the offense isn't really our issue at the moment. But I don't know. I think the Jets, they either have to go offensive line or something and stay with Darnold, or they do have to go for that bundle of picks because, I think that's the way they've set it up now. And personally, I think that it's good. If they're going to stick with Gase, well then good. Stick with Darnold and fix what you've created.
Fix what you've screwed up.
Yeah, and same goes for the head office as well. Personally, I'm happy for the players to not be tarnished with that 0-16 brush that only two teams so far have, and it also means that if they are sticking with Gase, well then he has to show us what he's really got, or continue to burn this thing to the ground.
Yeah, and I think but potentially it also puts a lot more attention than we were otherwise going to have on the other quarterbacks because Lawrence was so heavily dominating the discussion. But guys like Fields and a couple of the others that are there, they're just as deserving, especially when you see the variable quality of some of their play in the recent college games. There's just as much interest in some of those other quarterbacks, and hopefully the draft now gets a little bit more, as Brash was saying, a little bit more interesting. Probably the other, I guess, for me, interesting trend in the last 3 weeks has been the Raiders, who, let's face it, beat the Chiefs, looked like they were turning Derek Carr into MVP number 2 or whatever. Haven't they fallen off a cliff? They lost to the bloody Chargers, Shuttlesworth. A Thursday night football game that, just for me, draws into question John Gruden's longer-term coaching future, yeah?
Yeah, I think the Chargers are an interesting. I think both these teams on their day, we've seen them beat people that they probably shouldn't beat, if that makes sense. But I mean, Mariota,
and not always involving the Vikings, we should add.
Yeah, well, that's true. But I mean, Mariota, in terms of a backup, we've seen him play quality before, and he stepped in and did quite well. So you can't blame the quarterback. I don't know, a performance like that out of Darren Waller, and it still wasn't enough to overcome the rookie sensation in Herbert and his weapons. So, a little bit hard to explain that one, but the Raiders are still in with a shot to make the playoffs, so we'll see how we go from here. I think that's where Gruden's, what's this, his third year into his 10-year master plan, so he's still got plenty of time on his side in terms of his job, I think.
Oh, yeah, and look, for me, though, it just draws into doubt. Is he really getting improvement, or do they now have to suddenly, and I know it's hard with the injury to Carr and Mariota coming in and, some of the other things that happened. But let's face it, the Chargers are not world beaters, and Anthony Lynn is not the world's most fabulous coach. That team has choked a lot, and the Raiders basically just, they disappeared anyway. Brash, did you, obviously Herbert is a big star of that game, and it's lovely to watch, particularly compared to Mariota. You're watching Herbert much more than you're watching Mariota. Did you have any other takeouts from that game? Did you think the Chargers defense really stepped up? Aaron Donald probably back to his best?
Oh, that was there were a couple of things that were Aaron Donald for the Chargers.
Very good. I was a bit worried you were just going to
where are you going with this? This is the second time you've done that. You keep mixing up the two LA teams. Or you did that last week.
You're awake.
Last game as well.
I want to give you an opportunity to give me a smack in the head. And so last week you missed it.
Well, no, I didn't. I got you last week on it. When we last spoke about you picking the wrong LA team he played for. When you lose your starting quarterback early, and I think they had a bunch of starters on defence missing as well, the Raiders probably did. The Chargers have been putting up points consistently every week. Yeah, so they've been scoring well over 25. They've had a couple of donut efforts with Herbert being a rookie, and you'd expect that. But as he's gotten more comfortable, they've consistently put up 3-4 touchdowns every game. So you need to be on your game on offense if you're going to win against Chargers, because they are scoring. When you lose your starting quarterback early and you're already defensively limited as well, you're going to have your problems. But the thing that I found the funniest about that game was John Gruden forgetting which city he was in with his hat. So he came out with an Oakland Raiders hat and then had to change to a Las Vegas Raiders hat halfway through the game, which I thought was pretty funny.
It wasn't even a throwback game, so he doesn't have that excuse either.
No. So, but yeah, it was quite entertaining to watch. Mariota played all right.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you can't fault him for that, but let's give credit where credit's due. Herbert's going okay. He's getting better and better, right?
And not daunted under the pressure moments. He's had some close losses that he's had to endure. His head coach is not the best head coach in the league, but he's not dropping his bundle.
But once again, the Raiders struggled to close out a season.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. This, I don't know what the statistics are, but they could be the worst performed team in December over the last decade.
And, Gruden was supposed to change that. He's had massive turnover in players and front office personnel and coaching staff, and yet they've still got that.
Every team gets a pass mark this year. It's just such a ridiculous season. You're right. By the third season, he should have ironed that out, but this isn't a normal third season for him.
Yeah, true. Agree with that. I guess the thing that worries me though is the lack of consistency for them from being great to being super bad. It should also worth mentioning that their game was probably the first one, and at least it was both punters, where the punters sucked really badly and field position became a real yo-yo, largely because punters were just not. One punter got 0.011 fantasy points, and the other one got negative 1.65 fantasy points. Not that fantasy points are, necessarily a super indication of performance, but when you see a game and the punting is that bad, you know that the special teams have had a bad outing, and I think that also really put the pressure on the Raiders.
Yeah.
High-scoring game though, interesting game to watch.
I think one positive for the Chargers and Herbert is you look at the stats that he had 314 yards, 2 TDs, and you think, so Keenan Allen and Mike Williams and that had big days, but there's actually, Guyton and Tyron Johnson, Hunter Henry, you sort of expect that from him when he's healthy, but I think it's a good sign that he's doing it with other weapons more so than the seasoned veterans that you expect it for. I mean, Keenan Allen, he had 1 reception for 17 yards, Mike Williams 2 for 22, and he still put up 314 and 2 and 1, so it shows that he's, as a young guy coming in, and someone like Keenan Allen, you might get overly focused, la Baker Mayfield and Odell Beckham, and inevitably something's going to go wrong there from time to time. But he looks like he's just seeing what's available and going with it, and it's working.
And he's really developing very quickly in that regard for me, but particularly considering he wasn't, people weren't raving about him pre-draft as being the best quarterback in the class, and yet his speed of development of that field division and ability to use very different types of receivers really well, particularly because I don't think he's got, like I said before, I don't think that Anthony Lynn is necessarily the best coach for a brand young quarterback. But yeah, he's going really well. I mean, the future's super bright for him. And similarly, speaking about quarterback development, the other game that really stood out was, and it's unfortunate Blackie's not here to share his thoughts with us, but Josh Allen. Could anybody have predicted how well he'd be playing as quarterback of the Bills, say 2 years ago? He's just turned it around for me. Now, I know the Broncos are not necessarily, they're not the Chiefs, but that's still a team that's particularly historically for the Bills been really hard to play well against consistently, and he nearly put up 50 points on them.
Yeah. I don't think anyone saw this jump, but working on his mechanics, and I think Denver's suffering this year a little bit the same as the Vikings, missing Hunter with missing Von Miller.
Yes,
and they've got that very different, either old or very young defensive backfield. Once you don't get pressure, well, you're going to get torn apart, and someone as hot as Josh Allen at the moment is going to do that to a lot of teams. But and a little bit of homerism, I think Stephon Diggs, just his ability to get open on anyone, has been a massive security blanket for him. And as we saw again, 11 for 147, and there was drives there which were basically all Stephon Diggs just separating on his defenders and moving the chains.
Yeah, in everything that's going on this season, we deserve to see a Buffalo Bills Kansas City AFC Championship game.
Mm-hmm.
And if that doesn't happen, it will be a travesty for us. We deserve,
and especially if there could be like 5 inches of snow and howling winds, that would be the most fabulous thing to watch.
I think
because of the challenge.
I don't know. I think I'd prefer nice weather because that might be bloody 53, 56 or something.
I just think it will be a game that will have highlights across the board on both sides of the ball. I think if I look at the projection of what games are left for the rest of the year, it's the only potential matchup that excites me for the rest of the year.
I think
if
that
they
would
can
be
play an AFC Championship game.
Yeah, I think the Chiefs would. I think that's quite a bad matchup for the Chiefs. Given their cornerbacks versus what Josh Allen's doing. Obviously, the Chiefs are the Chiefs, and they will be favourite. But I think of all the matchups, I think they would want to avoid that one.
We'll talk about the Chiefs in a minute, but there's something not right with the Chiefs at the moment. They're a bit of an enigma at the moment. They're an enigma at the moment,
and certainly I think that's getting worse. It's not at the fully fraudulent level that the Steelers were at, but it's nowhere near as dominant as their performances were last year. You're right, it's getting worse. But we'll talk about that in a second. For me, just the reason I jumped to this game after we talked about Herbert was the phenomenal evolution of Allen. And Broncos, yes, they're missing Von Miller, but they still have a decent linebacker and run defense. They're in the top half of the league in run defense, and their linebacker core is still, they got Bradley Chubb on the field, for God's sake, running around out there, one of the best in the comp. They're not a trifling defense. You're not talking about the Philadelphia Eagles here. Josh Allen not only threw for 2 touchdowns and 360 yards, he had 2 rushing touchdowns. They were big, long runs too. Really seriously high quality performance from a young quarterback in a pressure game away from home. Wasn't like it was in front of the Bills Mafia with calls going their way or any of that sort of stuff. And as with Herbert, he got a shit ton of performance out of second and third tier receivers too. He wasn't just locking in on Diggs. Diggs was obviously a huge part, but they've turned Cole Beasley from a gadget person into a really reliable second receiver. Dawson Knox is a fabulous developing tight end, and they're getting performances out of their running backs as receivers as well. So, really interesting way they built that team too. I think there was one player, Jerry Hughes, who was there 2.5 years ago when they hired McDermott, and one guy from the practice squad who's the long snapper. The entire rest of the roster has been turned over in just 2 years, 2 seasons. And interesting, Crash, that's led them to the sort of success that they've had.
Well, they've had one advantage over a lot of other teams in that they've been relatively healthy all year. True. Compared to some of the other teams in the league. They probably the thing that struck me most about this game, and there were a few, and I watched a bit of it, and they kept going over to Horseface Elway in the box. Josh Allen should have been a Bronco, right? In the draft that the Bills took Josh Allen, the Broncos needed a quarterback and passed on him, and they could have taken him before Buffalo. And the thing is, Josh Allen has a lot of Elway in him as well. So it just seemed right now. I know 20/20 vision in the rear vision mirror is always wonderful, but I almost feel like the Broncos missed a massive opportunity to not draft Josh Allen when they had the chance.
And they're certainly paying the price for it now.
Well, they can't. How many quarterbacks have they started now since the second greatest of all time retired?
Oh, really? It's getting to Cleveland Browns.
Peyton Manning stuff. Yeah.
It's getting to Cleveland Browns jersey town almost. Not quite down the full length of the jersey, but it's getting
must
there.
Be 4 or 5, I'd say.
I think they've done 4 or 5 this year.
Yes.
and
that's not including Kendall Hinton. That was a ridiculous circumstance.
That was just not.
Yes. Sorry for the young fella.
Yeah, that was just not fair. Considering some other games got rescheduled and they did that to the Broncos. We spoke about that a few weeks ago. It just was not right. No. But they haven't sorted out their quarterback spot. I do like Locke, but has he got Locke to me could be a poor man's Carr. Right, in that sometimes he teases you that he could be really good, and then he's not. And Carr does it. Carr over in Vegas does that. For the Raiders. Raiders does that as well. Some days he just looks like, yes, he is an elite quarterback, and he teases you, and then he stinks it up for a while again.
Yeah, it would be. I mean, we were really looking forward to what Locke was going to look like this year, given Hamler and Judy were added to Cortland Sutton and Noah Fant. Unfortunately, Sutton's been missing, which would help Lock a lot because he's probably the one guy out of that group who will go up and win his own long ball. So hopefully we'll see next year what he can do with the full complement of receivings.
Yeah, and it was, I think we even said in the preview that they had all the pieces of a good offense, but it remained to be seen with the shortened off-season. You know, I remember us talking about this back in August, whether it would come together now. Injuries have absolutely culled any opportunity to see that team develop, so it's probably put them back a year in where they would be by the end of the year. You know, Locke's missed times. You said Sutton's been out all year. They've had some issues at running back as well.
Is their O-line healthy? I'm not too sure because their rushing has not. Well, Melvin Gordon's not terrible. Philip Lindsay's shown what he can do, but the rushing attack doesn't seem to be producing what we thought either. So I'm not sure about the O-line health, but maybe there's something there as well.
They don't seem willing to use Philip Lindsay consistently as the number one back. Because when they use him, when they go to him 20 times a game, he almost always has 100-yard game. He's very reliable, under the radar, but effective. But I mean, they split carries, as running back by committee between him and Gordon in this game, and just didn't get much out of it. We're joined by Fui.
Good evening. I was just going to say there's nothing wrong with their offensive line's health. It's more in the talent aspect. And I've been listening to you guys, obviously. And I think if they actually start to look and focus on that offensive line, they'll be fine on offense. They don't protect very well. They don't block for the run very well. They don't do anything very well on that offensive line. So, spend some draft capital there, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, really interesting too to see the Bills' defense come out of its shell. That for me is, if they're going to go deep in the playoffs, it's going to turn on their defense just as much as it's going to turn on Josh Allen. But you got to be fair to Drew Lock. He didn't have any turnovers, no interceptions, and he didn't fumble the ball. So the defense was really effective in restricting their running game, but also in making sure they just didn't get very much out of their passing game. And they do have some talent there between Judy and KJ Hamler and Noah Fant. There's some weapons there for Drew Lock, and they just took them all away. So
I think he did lose a fumble. I think it's the defense. Like, they're fifth in yards allowed this season, which is just not something we're used to seeing.
Not out of the Broncos, and certainly not in home games. They might get into Miami and play a stinker, or go to California and play a stinker in the heat. But you're not used to them playing that badly there in Denver. And speaking of home games that maybe saw less than stellar performance from the home team, real T-tail game in some senses, I guess you'd call it. Brash, the Carolina Panthers travelled to the Green Bay Packers.
Oh, what a snore-fest what that was.
Sacked their general manager thereafter. Going to be interesting to see how the Aaron Rodgers train proceeds, but if nothing else, he was brutally honest after the game at how bad they were in the second half. Really open about that. You probably wouldn't have watched the whole game, I'm guessing, Brash, just because it was T-tail time.
Yeah, but it wasn't exciting.
If you're the Packers, what does that say that you couldn't really put the Panthers away and you're so close to playoffs?
Yeah, I think you're allowed to, it's pretty hard to be up for a whole game. These are professional football teams, and the Panthers played okay in the second half. They suffered a pretty nasty turnover on their own goal line, which didn't help from a momentum perspective. You take that away and the game's closer earlier. It looks now like what it didn't quite happen the way we predicted, but it looks like the Packers have got the number one seed pretty well sewn up now in the NFC. So everything goes through Lambeau Field now. So, I haven't got a lot to say about this game. It was a pretty boring snorefest of an effort. The only interest for me was making sure the Giblets, quarterback, put up some decent points for us, which he did.
Impressed with Big Bob Tonyan, Shuttlesworth? I know you're a connoisseur of tight ends.
Yeah, always. It helps when they've got a good nickname. But Big Bob has been a red zone weapon, pretty much unmatched out of all the tight ends this year. They're interesting. The Packers. I mean, they're one of the teams where their offense and defense are both decent. It's just the four-quarter effort. And
have you seen their tackling.
In terms of stats, they're doing okay compared to some of the other playoff teams as well. But I mean, you just wonder if maybe where they start to get into trouble is when they think they're up and they try to start going conservative. It seems like maybe they're better off just trying to kick the foot down.
Yeah, don't go prevent defense. And Shuttlesworth, please stop regarding the division champions of the NFC East as a playoff team, all right? Because they're the only team. Whoever wins the NFC East will be the only team that has a defense that's worse in the playoffs than the Packers.
I
don't really know what to say.
I disagree with that. I think the
I'm not
Washington defense is damn good.
If Washington win, I will concede that, but I'm not convinced they're going to win the division.
Washington's defense is no joke.
Yeah, when they're all healthy and they got Chase Young out there, yep. But I still don't.
They were stiff not to win on the weekend, given they were starting a third-string quarterback. Yeah,
4th in total yards to Green Bay's 8th in total yards, so neither are terrible.
Stats, more stats. Have you seen the marshmallow schedule that the Packers have had?
Yeah, the Packers have played this year.
And
Everyone's had a marshmallow schedule. Everyone has.
You get to play Mitch Trubisky twice, so that's a handicap on the rest of the field for starters. That's like running the stall gift off 8 yards.
So what have you got to say for yourself, Fooey?
I'll be honest. I actually fell asleep during this game as well. I wasn't even at home either.
Say no more.
I'm just really worried about our tackling and Derrick Henry this week, so I'm more focused on that at the moment.
It'll be like Derrick Henry's top 10 stiff arms, all of them in the first quarter of your game.
Yeah, pretty much. It's
Derrick Henry, 700-yard rushing game. Yes, they'll actually have to take him off in the second quarter because his calf muscles will be overused.
But I'll just say on this game, in our defence, Carolina they've been playing. You know, they haven't been winning, but they've been hanging in to most games. So I don't think it's embarrassing that we didn't put them away. I mean, I would have liked to, of course, but yeah, they've been hanging in there against
Fooey,
every game.
It was a home game on the 19th of December in Lambeau Field against a team from Carolina, and you nearly lost it.
Oh, we didn't nearly lose it.
One goal line turnover away from losing it.
I think if that didn't happen, I think that's sliding doors and all that bullshit. That's anything could have happened, but it did. So it helped us get to where we score enough points to win the game. So
Cool.
Brasher, obviously you were quite impressed by one team's performance in the game. Seahawks against the football team. Surprisingly interesting game. I thought it was going to be a bit of a one-sided affair, but Russell Wilson, is he not quite yet on Big Ben levels of concern, but certainly not as dominant as he was earlier in the year?
Yeah, it's the Washington should have won this game. They had the ball last and were marching down the field, and they should have scored the game-winning touchdown. The fact they kept Wilson to what did he do? 130 yards, something like that, something ridiculous. Was pretty impressive, and that's why I think the Washington offense is pretty good. The thing that I find interesting about Seattle is for the last month and a half, they've actually got a pass rush, and it coincides with Carlos Dunlap showing up. And one player can make a difference, obviously. And they got him relatively cheap, and it's interesting that a team dumping a disgruntled player on the cheap as part of a fire sale can have such a positive effect for another team. Seattle had the worst rushing quarterback pressure rating in the league. And then Carlos Dunlap has shown up, and all of a sudden they look like a force again on defense. And it's one player that's made all the difference for them. He's a closer, yeah. He's one of these guys. We've talked about it before. He's one of these guys that makes the play when you need him to make the play.
And you can see he makes guys like the young bloke LJ Collier and Alton Robinson. You make
everyone better. You make everyone better because all of a sudden now you're accounting for someone on the defensive line, which means you've got a double team. You can't just go one-on-one, and every time you double team, that's one less player that's available to move the ball. Yeah, so when you have a tight end staying in and chipping a defensive end, or a running back that doesn't go out, flare out for a screen, or stays in to block, you limit the defense, the offense every time.
And Brash, I was going to defer this question to you, but I think we might go to Fooey because I know this will be the part of this game that Fooey was most obsessed by. being the quarterback whisperer and everything gives you some unique ability to comment on this game, but you also have a unique familiarity with strip club. And of course, this game saw Dwayne Haskins basically cost his team the game, and then very shortly thereafter appear maskless in a strip club. Did he burn himself? Is he going to start a game again for the Redskins, or do we see Nathan Peterman get traded to Washington and start games for the rest of the year?
Yeah, I reckon he's done his dash. I think he knows he's done his dash as well. He just doesn't give a shit anymore. He's probably having a bit of a hissy fit, and for losing the starting job. And this is the kind of juvenile behaviour, yet very cool, of course. But yeah, juvenile behaviour that he would do. So yeah, no. He'll get. I think he'll get another chance somewhere, but he'll have to prove it. Maybe he'll go to the Jets for a couple of years or something.
What do you think, Shuttlesworth? Was he really just maskless because his arm was so tired from 55 passing attempts that he couldn't lift it to put the mask on?
I don't know if we're allowed to swear on this podcast, but I just think he's a fucking idiot, to be honest. I mean, he's supremely arrogant and has never looked like he wanted to fully embrace the opportunity and take on board what people are trying to teach him. Unfortunate, because I think the young core that Washington does have is quite good, and it leaves them with a hole at the biggest position. But I think, add another weapon alongside McLaurin and touch up the offensive line a bit, and they've got a nice young team. But when you've got the hole at the QB, you're sort of nowhere.
Yeah, and the disappointing thing too for the Washington team was that they actually had a pretty good game out of, Brash was talking about the impact that Collis Dunlop had for the Seahawks as a recycled player. Washington have turned JD McKissick into a pretty decent running back. They got a good game out of him. They've turned Logan Thomas into a surprisingly productive tight end, sometime quarterback, and arguably Logan Thomas at quarterback probably would have been a better option than Dwayne Haskins the way the game turned out. So yeah, real shame I thought for the Washington football team. Still my favourites to win the NFC East, but it got a lot harder, particularly because another NFC East kind of team sort of had a win over the 49ers. Not only that, but I believe, Fui, that there might even be another signing of yet another quarterback to the 49ers. Josh Rosen, I believe, was just signed overnight as the backup. So we're going with CJ Beathard and then Josh Rosen. Is it time to sort of mitigate the damage for the rest of the season and maybe rest up some of your remaining offensive players for next year if you're the 49ers?
Oh yeah, definitely. I think
which ones would they be? There's none left. There's none left to rest.
I think Mostert's officially been put on ice, and they're officially out of the playoff picture now, aren't they? So yeah, lose, get as high a draft pick as you can.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to get too much higher, unfortunately.
You won too many games early.
Yeah. Josh Rosen, yeah. So we will see. So we've got CJ Beathard this week, or Beathard, whichever way you want to pronounce it.
Until he gets injured halfway through, and then you get Rosen.
No, he'll be okay. He won't turn the ball over. He just will forget to pass it altogether.
It was Mullins.
And just get sacked 30. Someone's got to put up a record sack number. I'm tipping an NFL record individual sack number this week against the 49ers. Whoever is playing up against right tackle McGlinchey, he's going to have a career day on Sunday. Or yes, it is Sunday morning.
Mm-hmm.
Something so I can sleep in Monday.
Yes, you can actually watch a game of Saturday football on Sunday time and have a reasonable Monday. Look, I wouldn't want to let the game pass without talking about the San Francisco defense. You got to give credit. They could have dropped the bundle, but they didn't. I think that's been the story of the year for most of their games. Their defense has kept them in it. And also Wisniewski, punter of the year for me, clearly in the NFL. Really having a solid year. Again, in a game where he had to punt a lot, was very effective.
Yeah, he gets more practice than any other punter in the league.
That bloke Braden Mann at the Jets gets a fair bit of practice.
Yeah, he gets a bit of practice, but I suppose he'd be leading the Jets punter if Mullins didn't turn it over so often as well. So But yeah, there's not much to say. I just want this season to be gone.
You've got to be happy. One little shining light you can take out of the season is how well Brandon Ayuk's come on in the second half of the year. Like his second half of the year's been amazing, especially for would be amazing for most players, but especially just another one of these rookie receivers that's come in and just taken off.
Yeah, between him, CD Lamb, Jefferson, it's just a stellar class. I can't remember a group of positional players coming out and taking the league by storm like those guys have. They've been phenomenal.
You're forgetting the big developing receiver, the absolute success story of your season, Richie James.
Richie James experience.
Richie James will be stacking shells this time next year. So a few others as well. I just wanted, we haven't had Mosa, Kittle, Samuel, and Ayuk on the field at the same time this year.
But do you realise that if you listed your receivers, you have an A-B-C-D formation in Brandon Ayuk, Kendrick Bourne, River Carcraft, whatever, and Ross Dwelly? So you can literally have a snap count that goes A-B-C-D and they'll know exactly who it's going to. What a stupid name is River Carcraft. Anyway, I think it might actually be Crackcraft, but I read it as Carcraft and I can't stop laughing. River? Yes, River Carcraft. Yeah, okay. Does it float or does it sink? It's like Brash's golf buggy when he drives it into the pond on the 17th.
There's no water on the 17th of my golf course. There is on the 18 and 16.
We might have to fix that. Fooey, I need you to do a raid in the middle of the night.
It'll be fun.
Look, probably for me, and I don't want to keep picking on people, but you made Mitch Trubisky look fucking good, Shuttlesworth. Jesus fucking Christ.
Yeah, like I said earlier, I sort of faded away from this game just because it was sort of just textbook for this season. You can sum it up by saying we sacked Trubisky once and we gave up 199 yards rushing, 146 of those to Montgomery. If you were going to miss anyone from our defense and it hurt as much as someone like Daniel Hunter, it would be Eric Kendricks, who missed for the second straight week. And it's clearly evident the difference that he makes. When he missed a few games a couple of seasons ago, you could see just in terms of overall organisation and missing his, tackling and pass defence, it's glaring. So not surprising, disappointing, but also I don't really want this team to scrape into the playoffs. If the teams of the last few years weren't going to do anything there, well then this one's definitely not. So I'd rather keep a nicer position in the draft and move on and hopefully plug a few holes with Hunter and Pierce and see what's what.
They'd probably beat New Orleans though.
If it was the playoffs, I would be tipping us to break their hearts again, and I would really enjoy it. But unfortunately, this time around, I think they might be pretty comfortable.
Yeah, it was interesting in that game, and Fui, you're the quarterback whisperer, so this will be a question for you, at least until Blackie the stats man comes back to the podcast. The Bears' winning approach was built around, and we've talked a bit in the previous few podcasts about this stupid trend of getting young quarterbacks to throw it 45, 50, 55 times a game. The Bears only threw it 21 times, and David Montgomery ran 32 times. I can't recall a game this year, I don't think, even including when Dalvin Cook was on fire and when Derrick Henry was on fire for the Titans. I can't recall a game where the running back had an individual running back had more rushing attempts than the quarterback had pass attempts, and they won. Is there maybe a message in that, Brash, about getting back to a bit more balance towards the running game instead of 55 or 60 pass attempts? Or is it just that Trubisky is shit?
Yeah, I think it was more a case of just not putting it in Trubisky's hands. I think they started with Trubisky, then they started then they lost 7 in a row or whatever they lost, and then got rid of Foles. Trubisky's back in, and I think they've realised that they don't have a quarterback who can win games off their own arm, so they will manage accordingly and do what they do best and be opportunistic on defence.
Yeah, and Shuttlesworth, I guess the last question I got for you as a fan of the Vikings is just I was really surprised to see them target both Dalvin Cook for receptions quite a bit, which is good to see. I thought that was nice to see them developing. He had 5 receptions. That was good to see him fleshing out that side of his game. And Justin Jefferson, obviously, they used a bit, but all the touchdown attempts went to either Chad Beebe or Tyler Conklin, with Thielen getting one there as well. Are they deliberately going away from Jefferson and Cook and Irv Smith on those touchdown red zone routes?
I don't see anything deliberate in it. I think that the Chicago defense is quite good, and in terms of taking away number 1s and 2s, I think they probably just did their job, and we had to look elsewhere. I don't think that the Vikings offense gets cute like that and says, "Oh, this is not what they're thinking," or that kind of thing. I think it was probably just a bit of going with what was open and it not working.
So I'm overthinking it and then attributing motivations that are not true motivations. I'd never do that. Never, ever. Lamar Jackson's back, but they were playing the Jaguars, so we won't talk much about that game. For me, probably it was a T-tail game on one level, but it was really interesting in the sense that it confirmed the changing of the guard, at least for 1 year. Patriots-Dolphins. Patriots officially out. Dolphins officially in playoffs.
Not yet.
Not yet? You think they could still lose?
No, because they've unfortunately, I think they're in. I don't dislike the Ravens, but unfortunately the Ravens have got the 2 New York teams to close out the season, and I think they'll win those 2 and probably just keep the Finns out, unfortunately.
Interesting prediction. For what it's worth, I rate both the Giants and the Jets' chances against it. And remember, I had the Jets until that fucking prick Greg Williams did me a dirty. My only betting prediction of the year, in fact, was to tip the Jets, and they nearly got there until that Greg Williams fuck up. All right, so technically the Dolphins aren't in yet. Can we agree the Patriots are out?
They are officially out.
Yeah, they are.
And can we agree Cam Newton's out, or is that premature?
It depends on what they find. They don't have anything, and if they don't find anything, well, he's the best of what they've got.
They're definitely in a state of flux at the quarterback position at the moment. I think they'll be drafting one.
Yeah.
Interesting point that I heard from this game is that Miami hadn't had a 100-yard rusher in 2 seasons, I think it was, and
that's unbelievable.
From Salvon Ahmed of all people.
Mm-hmm. And bizarrely, he also cracked up, I think, 1 reception for 5 yards. So he did it in both 23 attempts, 122 yards. And again, putting that in context, Tua only had 26 pass attempts. So I go back again to that Bears stat that I quoted. In this case, the running back almost took more rushing attempts than Tua had passing attempts. Maybe that's a weather-driven thing. I don't know.
Yeah, but I think with much like our game too, I mean, you identify, I don't know how much of a weakness it may have been for the Patriots, but he was going for 5.3 a carry, so it obviously wasn't very good. So, I mean, once that's going, just feed the hot hand.
What do you think, Brash, in terms of the quality of the game? Does it look like the Patriots have checked out for the year?
I think they're still trying. I don't think Bill Belichick knows how to do that. Yeah, I think he always, I don't think he has any other win. He has absolutely 0 offensive skill positions. You cannot win in this league this anymore if you don't have difference makers. We talk about being accountable for stars on defensive lines and all that, and how that can affect an offense. There is nothing for an opposition defensive coordinator to have to plan against the Patriots.
Yeah, and all their holdouts this year are defensive players, I think. So they've got even Brady's last year. They didn't have a lot to get excited about on the offensive side of the ball, did they? No. Well, I mean, if they did have, he wouldn't have gone. That's my opinion. I think if he saw tools that he could challenge for a Super Bowl again, I don't think he would have left, regardless of the relationship.
Yep, agree with that.
And speaking of Tommy Boy, cracks up another win over the great Matt Ryan. I don't really know what to make of the game, to be frank, except do you think Brady's mob gets into the playoffs, given what you just said, Shuttlesworth? Do you think he's made the right switch and he gets in?
It's hard to say. I hope they do scrape in for the storylines. I think it would be interesting. Their defense has obviously got to start better because you're not going to claw. I'm not too worried about their offense apart from the running back roller coaster. It's a bit iffy at times, but sort of Antonio looks like he's sort of finding his place. Their defense, though, the cornerbacks and that are a bit weak. Phenomenal performance by Devin White. Another class this year that's been really impressive with the rookies is the linebackers with the Queen and Murray Jr. and that. But it's. I think they'll make it just on offensive power, but they wouldn't want to let teams that aren't chronic chokers get these kind of leads on them.
Brash, what did you think? Much to sort of kind of predict about how far the Brady-led Buccaneers can go in the playoffs, or are we looking at more of one and done playoff run?
In sort of one, didn't the Buccaneers have the Falcons exactly where they wanted them when the Falcons jumped out to a lead? Isn't that sort of like the Falcons' way? Like if they played it close, the Falcons win. The Falcons jump out to a lead and they lose. I don't think as much as it pains me to say, I think the two class teams of the league right now are the two AFC teams we spoke about before, the Chiefs and the Bills. You can throw a blanket across Packers, Seattle. I think I assume we'll talk about the Saints in a minute. They're a little bit underwhelming at the moment. Bucks, one of them's going to emerge, and it wouldn't surprise me if the 5th or 6th or 7th seed, even though they've got to go through Lambeau Field to get there, emerges the NFC Super Bowl team, and it could be just as easy the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, because I think all the NFC teams have flaws in one way, shape, or the other. We've talked about the Packers, aversion to tackling. Seattle, they haven't exactly played that well on either side of the ball the last month. The less said about the NFC East, the better.
I think, though, that if it shakes out the way it looks like it should, and Tampa Bay do get in, I think they're in line to play whoever wins the NFC East.
And Tampa against the Washington defense would be a fascinating game.
So you'd say that's basically a first-round bye for Tampa. And all of a sudden they're in the thick of it because then, there's no more buys. Everyone's playing. They'll have to be on the road. That's the only problem. They'll be 100% road warriors.
They're 5-2 away, so it's not the worst thing, maybe.
Yeah.
I heard an interesting comment on another podcast that the first half.
Wait! You listen to podcasts other than this most outstanding festival of excellence? You fucking traitor!
I read the transcript. I didn't listen to it.
Nice save.
But I read that they said that the first half is what Arians had been planning and attempting to make them that week, and then once it gets to that point in the second half, it's Brady running the offense. So I'm not sure how much is to that. But
have you been borrowing Fui's tinfoil hat? Have you?
No, but it was from people who I believe have no reason to dislike Arians. So it's interesting. It'd be interesting to see if there is something to that, and whether when Brady takes the reins and sees it and calls it out there rather than whatever they've attempted to draw up during the week, it does function a lot better.
He certainly also seems to be able to get a better response from their defense. That Tampa defense is very variable, and when he's more involved on the sidelines, they seem a little bit more effective. So again, that might just be I haven't watched every single game.
Do we see? I just want to mention how underrated Calvin Ridley is, but also, do we see Matt Ryan at the Falcons next year?
Not with the dearth of quarterback around the league. There's so many quarterback needy teams.
Actually, to answer that question, where are Atlanta in the draft order at the moment? Because they wouldn't replace Ryans with another veteran, right? So it'd be rookie. It'd be highly rated rookie.
Do they have the capital to maybe take the second from the Jets?
I think any team that's probably going to miss the playoff, if they're depending, they'd have to probably throw out their 2021 pick one as well as a minimum.
I mean, the other thing that particularly that the Falcons have is the older wide receivers there as options too. I think I can't remember which one it is, but one of them's technically under contract next year. If they were to throw them in with the pick, that might well potentially be enough to get another team over the line to give them a first. If you think you're one player away, and you need one wide receiver, you might give Atlanta a late first rounder. If you team like Green Bay, which has no wide receivers of any ability beyond Devontae Adams.
Thank you. That's better.
You might well put in a pick number 31 or whatever to get yourself a wide receiver veteran from the Falcons, and suddenly that gives the Falcons an extra first rounder that they can throw at the Jet. I don't know. But certainly, I think the bigger question is, would Matt Ryan want to stay for another year in Atlanta?
They might just fire sale it, and the ever injured Julio Jones might have to go as well.
Well, I mean, yeah, they are in the top 5 of a quarterback-rich draft. It would be stupid of them not to consider drafting a quarterback to replace Ryan, because he's not. He's on the downside of the hill at the moment. He's not finished, but he's not going to get any better. Yeah, I think they definitely have to think about it.
Or they could trade Julio to the Pack for.
Oh, definitely. There was talks of trading Julio before the trade deadline. I'd be glad to have him, to be honest.
If he continues on this track,
they'll take Love off your hands.
His value's never going to be as high as it is. If he has another year like this, it's going to plummet. So,
agreed. Look, probably the other 2 games of the week that are worth talking about. The upset win of the week, Jet against your favourite mob, Shuttlesworth, the Ram, Jared Goff. I know what a big fan of Jared Goff you are. What do you take out of this game except the Jets just blew their foot off, and isn't that so Jet?
Just supreme embarrassment for the Rams and Sean McVay. But as I said earlier when we were discussing it, I'm kind of happy that the Jets blew it. Just if they stick with Gase and the current head office, I'm happy for the players to not be
0-16. Yeah,
0-16 and join the Browns and the Lions and be tarnished with that. I'd like to see them now stick with Darnold, and if they do stick with Gase, well then I'd like to see him fix what he created. But I didn't watch much of it. I don't take much out of it other than I'm happy for the Jets playing roster.
Brash, you would have been delighted to see Johnny Hecker have his first block punt in 120 punt.
You're making a massive assumption that I even had a passing interest in this game, that I would have noticed a punt being blocked.
But it was the first time he's had a block punt, 120 punt, league record.
Yeah, but he plays for the Jets, so that would have been like...
He plays for the Rams.
Sorry, he plays for the Rams, so that would have been like... no, my comment means nothing now if he doesn't play for the Jets.
I think we're 1.5 minutes into the 3 minutes, so we'll jump ahead. Fui, I know you would have absolutely revelled in the opportunity to give GG more shit about what a crap quarterback Jared Goff is. Was this one on Jared Goff or on the special teams?
I think you just put it down. I think it's on everyone, really. They to let the Jets score so many points, which is pretty good for them. It was just maybe they were looking ahead. Maybe just blame it on the coaching, not getting their team ready for what should have been an easy game.
And look, you can't say the Rams don't have weapons. Cooper Kupp, Tyler Higbee, Malcolm Brown, Cam Akers, Robert Woods. That's a pretty loaded, really decent, solid set of weapons for a supposed stud like Jared Goff, and he just shriveled up. It was a bizarre game. Happens once a year, I guess.
Which moves us more often than that with him.
Did you hear that, GG? Moves us right along to the last game of interest for the week, which was the Saints against the Chiefs. On paper, really interesting game. Turned out to be quite close. The Chiefs were not spectacular, but got the job done in the end. For me, the thing that stood out was the Saints defense played much better this week. The previous week, the Saints gave up 100-yard rushing for the first time in 56 games and 2 100-yard rushing efforts against them for the first time since 1980. So they don't tend to give up a lot of rushing yards. And I was a bit worried. I thought, well, maybe their defense is going to fall apart against what's a pretty talented set of rushing backs from the Chiefs and a bloody good offensive line there at Kansas City. So I thought maybe the Saints would fold in their run defense, and actually they bounced back real well and their defense kept it close. What did you see in the game, Brash?
I am stunned that this was a one-possession game at the end of it. I'm not. See, the Chiefs are just an enigma. Like are they winning as a team, or on individual brilliance? And I think it's both, because you look at, there was a couple of touchdowns they scored. There was that one where Mahomes found, who was the quarterback, the wide receiver in the corner of the end zone, when it looked like he was throwing it away, which was just him scrambling to his left, and he's a right-handed quarterback, so that's hard to do in itself. And then there was that design little flick pass, tight, on the goal line pass to the tight end, which was just all coaching, right? But then you watch New Orleans, and they come out and they look terrible. Like, Breeze should have thrown 3 interceptions in his first 8 passes, right? In fact, the Kansas City Chiefs cornerbacks had a better chance of having receptions than any New Orleans wide receiver to that point of the game. And yet they still only lost. And Bree threw a 60-metre pass in the air. Like, what was going on in this game? Like, that's more than normally all his passes travel in the air for an entire game. I still can't believe that game was closed, which says to me something that's still not right about the Chiefs. The Chiefs should have won that by 60 points the way New Orleans started that game.
For me, I thought the really interesting thing about that game was how poor the Saint receiving core was. Highest number of receptions was Emmanuel Sanders, 4 receptions. And I know obviously Michael Thomas was out, so that's a key weapon they were missing in their receiving, but they just couldn't get it done. Alvin Kamara, running back, had 3 receptions, second highest number of receptions on the whole damn team. They just couldn't get any, and I didn't think the Chiefs' cornerbacks were spectacular. As Brash has already mentioned, they dropped a shit ton of potential interceptions. But Drew Brees just couldn't. He looked impotent. Couldn't get any kind of downfield distance. Is that a sign of things to come in the run into the playoffs for the Saints, Fooey?
I think it's obviously a little bit of Breeze's age, a little bit of just coming back from injury. I think it's probably just a combination of both those things. Because of his age, he's not going to recover quite as well as he would have as a 25-year-old. So, I think it was expected. Will he get any better? Probably. Will he get back to his old self? I don't think so. So they're going to have to really alter their game, I think, to include the running backs a lot more and running the ball a lot if they're going to be successful in the playoffs.
Shuttlesworth, appreciating that the Vikings are hardly at the moment the school of quarterback excellence. You do at least have a really strong running back history over the last few years. What do you think of the decision to keep Taysom Hill in the game as a running back? Was that just gadget magic gone mad, or is he really seriously a running back threat?
I think you're mad to question anything to do the greatest athlete the world has ever seen. The man that can play every position and coach every position and do everything. So I don't know. I find Taysom Hill really strange. Like, he's clearly a very talented person, but some of the things they try with him are just so blatantly obvious and get blown up. And I just find it really strange. I think their problem was rushing Breeze back from 100 broken ribs. I don't know whether they wanted to make sure he had enough time before the playoffs or what it was, but it clearly showed that he wasn't ready, and he couldn't get power or accuracy into his throws at this stage. So it'd be interesting to see how we play him into confidence and performance this week. But they would want to get something going for the playoffs, because even with Michael Thomas back, that's not going to change these kind of results.
Oh, and it's not like Michael Thomas coming back, or even your shit defense, Fooey's mob's shit defense playing them, suddenly gives Breeze the ability to throw 15 extra yards.
No.
For me, that's a change,
I think the Chiefs are a strange one. It's like I don't know whether it's coasting or bad coasting, but these games, they just never seem to be too concerned. They just do enough. So whether that's sort of, they have this tendency to sort of at stages play down to their opponent, it is. But if Edwards-Helaire is in picking up Le'Veon Bell, could be master stroke come playoffs time.
Well, it was interesting. They split the carries almost 50-50 between those two in this game. So they're definitely like, early on, it looked like Bell wasn't really being used much.
How much did Edwards-Helaire miss though? I can't remember when he hurt himself.
Yeah, I think he was out by half time or maybe just after, but I could be wrong. So yeah, and some of that was by necessity, but it wound up looking like, on the surface, quite a deliberate 50-50 split. And interestingly, Bell was able to be relatively productive. Got in for a TD and 62 yards, which is not a bad average yards per carry. For me, the other thing that stood out about the Chiefs, though, and it's been a real emerging thing, I reckon part of and I don't want to call it a problem yet because I'm not convinced that it's become a problem, but a number of the games where they've looked a bit off, like when they played the Bills and when they lost to the Raiders, Mahomes has actually run the ball a fair bit. So against the Raiders, he ran it 6 times. Against the Bills, he ran it 10 times. He had 7 rushes of his own, one of which resulted in a fumble. I wonder, I'm just not sure that he's a Lamar Jackson type quarterback necessarily. I mean, obviously when you're under pressure and you're trying to escape a sack, you want him to run away. But I get a sense they might be trying to use him as part of developing their running game, and I'm not sure that's a surefire tactic for them. Am I being overly negative?
I think maybe this, in regards to this game, New Orleans defense and I think maybe that was just plan B after things were covered.
Fui, what do you think of the game? More evidence that Mahomes is not quite as dominant as he was last year, or is it more that he got the job done and move on to next week?
I think they've definitely got the look of a team that won the Super Bowl last year. They're probably, I wouldn't really call it a hangover, I guess, but because they're clearly not too hungover. They're winning a lot of games. But it is, to me, they're winning the games off the arm talent of Mahomes, where last year they were explosive, and this year it is just, okay, well, let's get it done. It'll be interesting to see if they can find the level they were at last year come playoff time. I think that's one of the good things about this year. Even the champs, the 13 and 1 or whatever they are, they're beatable. They look beatable. And if they keep playing like this, I'm not going to make any brash predictions right now. But
we'll leave those to Brash. We'll leave the brash predictions to Brash.
But they look like they're just getting by at the moment. So
yeah, they do get the job done. And I mean, I'm still not convinced that they've got what it takes if Mahomes gets hurt. He's becoming an ever more irreplaceable cog in their wheel, I think.
Imagine losing the Chiefs backup. That'd be embarrassing.
Flip side is I'm still impressed and surprised. And Brash made the point earlier, if their defensive backs had held their interception opportunities in that first quarter, this game could have been over by quarter time. There could have been 6 interceptions potentially in the first 15-minute game time. And that, as bad as Breeze was in the game, admittedly he's injured and he wasn't throwing in his normal motion, you can't underrate just how good the defensive backfield is that they've patched together there in Kansas City. And then you add in your Frank Clark and your Johns with their pressure, and it's a pretty damn impressive defense,
Yeah, they've got that mix of workmanlike and stars, a couple of stars in there, and they've got enough to keep to win a game on defense if need be, and to keep it close if the offense isn't firing.
All right, I probably want to wrap up the review of week 15, but probably, I guess, building on the point, and Phil, you would have missed this because you were in your car having road rage with people on the freeway, but we were saying earlier that week 13 turned out to be the ultimate festival of quarterback suckiness, and that was the last time we recorded, and that was followed by week 14, which, against all expectations, produced an even suckier performance by a group of position players, namely kickers, and that week 14 performance by the kicking fraternity ranks as the worst single week performance by kickers in the last 31 years of NFL history in the regular season. And unsurprisingly, given Shuttlesworth on, I can't let this slip. There was a Gary Anderson level performance from one Vikings kicker, but you kept him around. Got to give him credit. Kept him around, Saki. Obviously, your organisation is showing emotional depth and maturity. Shuttlesworth, you'd agree with that?
Yeah, 2 for 2 this week. 3 for 3 on extra points. All's good.
Very good.
Happy we're all the best of friends.
But not only, I just thought it couldn't get any better, but then week 15 became the week of a punter. Or more accurately, if you're the Jaguars, the week that a kicker became a punter. Aldrich Rosas was left to do both kicking and punting. Rosas had never kicked a punt in a game, including in college. He managed to average 36.7 yards on his 3 punts. That's not a great result. Since 2000, there's only been one punter that averaged less than 36 yards a punt, and he was cut after his only game of NFL football ever. So arguably, Rosas is the second worst punter ever since 2000. But it's a bit like when Kendall Hinton ran out for the Broncos as quarterback. You can't really put too much shit on him because it wasn't something he'd ever trained for. However, and this was a bit unexpected, because there was no punter when he was doing his normal job, Rosas had to have a holder for his kick for things like field goals and point afters, who was a bit of a replacement amateur. And sure enough, you got to rely on those special teams long snappers to create a bit of excitement and interest. The long snapper snapped the ball so high that the backup catcher missed it completely, and Rosas had to jump something like 6'9" in the air to catch the ball. And unsurprisingly, he didn't punt the ball very well on that attempt. And then of course we had the excellent in the Eagles game where not only was there a blocked punt, but the punter was knocked unconscious without any contact above the waist. The punter was knocked unconscious by his punt block. So week 15, ladies and gentlemen, punters are much more important than you realise, because for the whole rest of that game, with their punter unconscious, the kicker had to take punt, and Zach Ertz became the holder for the kicker's attempt. Unsurprisingly, he didn't make any. Does this mount an argument, do you think, Shuttlesworth, for us having a bench backup punters for every game? Do we need to extend squad sizes?
I wouldn't go that far. I think you just have to have your backups take a few more reps, maybe.